Hello, and today I have a guest on my channel here to talk about language insecurities and specifically what language learning is like as an introvert. So would you like to introduce yourself, Jonathan?
Yeah, sure. My name is Jonathan. I run the channel Seabolt Speaks here on YouTube. I document my journey more so on the aspect of learning. I always thought that there were so many channels that speak about it from a position of having already learned. And I thought, man, there's got to be a market for people wanting to see the process versus hearing about the process after it's already done. And so I started that, and yeah, I just document kind of my progress learning languages.
And I see that too, and actually it's funny that you mentioned that because I've noticed that I tend to gravitate more toward that style of videos, at least as a viewer, is that it's much more interesting to watch people actually studying, to see their technique rather than just lessons all the time, although both are useful, but
Absolutely.
it's nice to actually see in practice what it's like.
Yeah, well, I think there's something to be said because I think that once you already learn something, I think that you can kind of forget your hardships and some of the struggles. But as I'm going through learning, like when, through the last year of trying to learn Japanese, I would openly talk about my struggles versus there's a lot of people who are like, I don't really remember not knowing that or like that kind of thing. And so I thought, it's just not that there's not value in that, there absolutely is. But I think that there's a lot of times that it's kind of like once you've prevailed, like once you get so far, it's like
Yeah,
you can kind of forget some of the struggles that you had.
you definitely do. Yeah, and that's actually why I started learning a new language not too long ago. My Mandarin is pretty new because I noticed that I had forgotten how to start from the beginning because it had been so long.
Mm-hmm.
And I noticed that I was kind of doing that. I was like, I'm going to teach from the beginning, but and I thought about it, like, how do I actually start a language again from the beginning? Because it's been so long. It's been like 6 years since I started my last one.
Mm-hmm.
So it's, yeah, it is important to be aware of that as we're learning.
Right.
And as a language learner, you're learning Japanese, and so with your process then, where do you think that these language insecurities and like being able to practice speaking, I know in particular as an introvert, can be
Right.
challenging. So how do you go about that process, or like how do you feel
Well,
going through that process?
well, what's actually really funny is I've noticed that there is a right down the street from me. There's a restaurant that is. I mean, it's literally a place called Joe's Deli, so it's not like anything crazy. But the owners of it are from Egypt, and I do know very, very, very tiny bits of Arabic. Like I can
Okay.
say hello and thank you, and then I can order. I can literally. I learned just because of them just to order food in Arabic. Like I can like ana yasmaya, lamama, whatever. Like I can order like steak sandwich, whatever the case may be. But what I've noticed is from where I know so little, I'm actually more confident in speaking because I'm not worried. Anything that they say, I know I can default to. I don't really understand. I just know a couple things. It's
Yeah.
almost like the more that I know, because the more that you know, it's like the less that you know, and therefore it's like there's more gaps in your stuff because then you'll start to say stuff that
That's
you
true.
think that you know and you don't. And so, as a matter of fact, literally last night I went there and I went in and the conversation from start to me finishing the order was like the hellos, the how are yous, the I'm goods, the I would like to order this with this was all in Arabic. And then after that,
Okay.
boom, it was English and it was all good.
It's more like following
Um,
a script when you're
Right,
at
right,
that very beginning
exactly,
stage. Yeah.
exactly. And honestly, that's probably a lot of it is not following, you're not free flowing. It is more so following like these set phrases that you learn. But it's just one of those things that which it's not like I run into a ton. I've had like an opportunity to speak to Japanese people maybe 3 or 4 times in my life.
Okay.
They're just not around here and stuff. But
And you're located in
I'm
where
in
are you located?
Virginia. Yeah.
Virginia. Okay.
And there's just not a lot around here. And two, like I think from where Arabic's not something that I studied so intently, like it's not like I almost feel like as someone who's learned Japanese a little bit, like it's almost like I owe the Japanese like this awesome, amazing like Japanese speaking ability. So that almost makes me not want to try it, either.
Okay. Yeah, and it is because sometimes we psych ourselves up so much for it, like about it, and it's like, oh, and then we make it so much more challenging than it is.
Yeah.
But the other thing, like with being an introvert and learning language or practicing is that a lot of people think that if someone is an introvert that they are like afraid or very timid about speaking around other people and being around other people. And sometimes that's the case, and I don't know if that is for you or not, but for me at least it is not so much of that and just enjoying my own practice. How do you feel about that topic?
Yeah. Well, so I am introvert. I don't want to be the first person to talk, but once kind of the icebreaker happens, then I'm more okay with like talking to people. And this is, I'm just even referring to English. Like, I'm not going to go up to a random stranger. Like, even if I go to a place where there's like mutual friends, I'm not going to openly talk to people like until until someone like addresses me. That is just kind of how like I am.
So when you are speaking to other people, like from that, like looking at that introvert perspective, is it like you feel like you're afraid to speak, like nervous about speaking, or is it just coming from a desire of not wanting to speak so much with other people? Because I know, like for me, I'm always just thinking.
Right.
It's not even like I'm afraid to speak, or it's just not having something to say.
Right.
And sometimes that can make language learning very difficult too, because if you don't have anything to say, then it's like, okay, what do I say? And how do I say it in this language?
Yeah, like I would say it's kind of a mixture of some things, but I think a lot of it is not knowing like a similar interest with somebody.
Yeah.
Like, for example, like if I was going to go to, we'll just say someone who's Japanese, right? And let's say that I was going to be like, okay, cool. Like I'm comfortable enough in my Japanese to talk to somebody about some food and stuff like that, right? Like you know, like that's like always anytime I ever study anything, a lot of times I'll learn like I'll watch like shows about food because it's super common, but then it's also like kind of it's like a double whammy because you're always going to need to eat. So it's like you're learning stuff in
That's
but
true.
then you can
Yeah.
also use it in different manners. But
Food's a
so
good
let's
one.
say, yeah, so like let's say I was like, all right, cool, let's talk about this cooking show, and then they're like, I hate cooking shows, and then it's like, and then they're like, oh, but what about this? And I'm like, don't know that in Japanese, sorry, dude. And so like, um, I almost feel like the what I equate it to, and this is really dumb, but what I equate it to is growing up, I practiced doing like sleight of hand card magic and coin magic and stuff like that. And I was always nervous to show somebody a trick because I was afraid that when I did it, they would A, want more, and B, they would be like, oh, let me get my friend and you can show them. And I do not like being put on the spot on something I'm not prepared for. So, like, if I would go somewhere and I would be like, oh, look at this, and I would like do something with cards, and they're like, let me get my friend. And I'm like, no. And they're like, well, do it again. You just did it. And it's like, no, like, this was it. This is what I prepared for.
Yeah.
That's it. And it's kind of the same thing with languages.
Yeah, it's nice to be able to just get into your own practice, like with languages. And I know a lot of language learners are introverts because of just the nature of spending so much time studying and reading and writing. And you do need a little bit of speaking. You do need speaking as well.
Sure.
But there's so much, especially in the beginning stages, that you can do on your own. And it takes a lot of self-awareness. So I think maybe that's why introverts even excel in language learning because of that self-awareness. And you look at like the polyglot community, there's a lot of people who are just very much in their own space, but then they have a community where they can come to talk with other people who are also introverted.
Right. Well, I think too, when you go and try to talk to somebody, like I think a huge problem, and I'm myself am guilty, but a lot of people will try to have the same quote unquote personality in the foreign language and try to articulate the exact same way that they would in their native language. And I mean, that's not always the case. Like, and so like for me, when I'm speaking, it's really hard I don't have a great vocabulary. I'm not super smart. Like I just have my basic vocabulary that I grew up with watching like Seinfeld and stuff like that. But it's like it's really hard for me to like get it down to like almost that idea. Benny Lewis did a thing where he was talking about Tarzan speak, right? Like he was talking about how if you're learning Spanish, just learn the infinitive, and then if you have to, you can literally say I past tense to eat, and they'll understand that. Like, and it's really hard for me to do that because I feel like I'm selling short the person that I'm talking to. And so it's hard for me to change the way that even though you have to,
Mm-hmm.
but
Yeah, and that is a good point, because it is difficult to express yourself in another language, especially with a lower level in that language. And I know, like, my Spanish, I feel pretty comfortable expressing myself in that language, but even sometimes it's challenging. But for the most part, it's mostly vocabulary is what I lack sometimes. But in my other languages, like in my French, I can barely speak at all. And it's like that. It's like, okay, I can kind of get some points across, but I can't
right.
use because the vocabulary is what really allows you to, like, using all of the different adjectives and verbs, and you can create that personality, like you said, within the
Right.
language, and you just don't always have that.
Yep. Well, and that actually, you talking about how you can barely speak your French also goes into another point of, like, sometimes people, yes, we want to speak. No one's saying that we don't. Sometimes people are okay with just understanding. Like, for me with Japanese, like, I would have people leave comments on my video, or like when I was doing a live stream, they would leave little Japanese things, and it's, even if I could read them and understand them, that doesn't mean that I could respond to them. But then then it's like this judgmental thing of, well, you don't know as much. And it's like, look, I'm comfortable with what if I can watch some TV shows and stuff like that and understand it. I mean, I feel like that's pretty solid. And then the more that happens, the more that it'll enforce.
Yeah.
Therefore, the more that my speaking ability can become better. But sometimes people are okay with, they just want to immerse in a culture and be cool with that, and then like, and then just be able to speak a little bit. Like, I mean, I don't know, like, I know it's weird, but like, I don't think that language learning always has to be about having to speak to somebody. Like obviously I'm learning
No, it makes
Spanish.
sense.
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
like, I'm learning Spanish to speak to people, like for
Hmm.
going to Mexico again or anything like that. But like with Japanese, I don't really care about this idea of outputting, because I'm never, unless I go to Japan, the odds of
Yeah.
using it are very slim. I've been alive. Next month will be 34 years, and I've been able to speak to a Japanese person, like I said, 3 or 4 times. So not great odds.
Yeah, and that makes sense, because it's like looking at your specific goals within that language. And if for Japanese it's just being able to understand, then that's fine. You're
Yep.
achieving your goals. But the other thing to consider is that, like, even if you are speaking, which I know you do a little bit of speaking practice, but that also helps the understanding, just the
Oh
act of
yeah,
using the language. So they do
yeah,
kind of work together. But you're always going to have some skills that are higher or lower than
absolutely. Yep.
others. And yeah, it's just part of the process. There's no, like, one size fits all approach. There's no
Right.
one level that we're going to reach for all of our languages for
Right.
everyone.
Yep.
But yeah, I think this was an interesting conversation around language insecurities and introvert, and also just how to go about learning a language based on your own goals.
Yeah. Yeah. Don't. I mean, and I've been guilty of that. Like, I'll read my comment. I'm sure you read your comments,
Hmm.
and you almost feel pressured sometimes. But like, man, it's not that I don't care what people say. It's just
Yeah.
that people you only see people only see what you upload to your channel. People only see what I upload to my channel. And so you don't like they don't always understand everything that's going behind what you're doing. And so it's not that we don't appreciate the information, it's just that sometimes that's not what our goals are. That doesn't make it any less valuable or whatever. It's just that, I mean, you
Yeah.
know, that's just
And
not
this
what
is
my goal
really
is.
where that self-awareness comes in too, is just knowing that, like, hey, this is my goal, and
Right.
I'm making progress toward it, or achieving it, or just
Right.
getting closer to it, and
Right.
that's fine. So thank you so much for coming over to my channel to do
Yeah.
this video with me, and I will link your channel and all your information down below in the description as well, so anyone
Cool.
watching this can head over to your channel and take a look at everything that you have going on
Sweet.
over there. Is there
Yeah.
anything you'd like to add before we sign off?
No, I appreciate chatting. I love, as introverted as I am. There's always the icebreaker of
Yeah.
being a language learner, so that's kind of the
Mhm.
icebreaker. So I always love talking language learning and stuff like that. So I appreciate the chat, and hopefully we can do it again.
Yes. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.